Commander Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he stared at the main screen on the bridge of the UES horizon. Today was the day that would change everything for humanity. After decades of searching the stars and finding nothing but empty planets and dead rocks, they had finally received a signal. Not just any signal, but one that came from intelligent beings somewhere out in space. The ship hummed quietly around him as his crew worked at their stations. Everyone knew how important this moment was. Earth had spent 20 years preparing for first contact with alien life. They had books full of rules about what to say and what not to say. They had practiced the meetings hundreds of times. They had even built special translation computers that could turn alien languages into English. Jake looked over at Ambassador Lisa Carter, who stood near the communications station. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. She had been chosen to speak for all of humanity because she was good with words and never got nervous. At least, she never seemed nervous. Right now, though, Jake could see her hands shaking. Just a little bit. Peter Hayes sat at his computer, checking the translation program one more time. He was the smartest person Jake had ever met when it came to languages. Peter could speak 12 different Earth languages and had spent years creating the system that would help humans talk to aliens. His computer was humming and clicking as it ran through final tests. The first sign that the aliens were coming was a strange ripple in space itself. Jake had seen ships come out of hyperspace before, but never like this. The space in front of them seemed to bend and twist like water. Then, slowly, shapes began to appear. Jake's mouth fell open. The alien ships were nothing like what humans had imagined. They looked like they were made of glass or crystal, and light seemed to dance around them in colors that Jake had no names. Four. Each ship was huge, bigger than any city on Earth. They moved without making any sound, floating through space like ghosts. There were 12 ships in total, arranged in a perfect pattern. The largest one was in the center, and it was so big that Jake had trouble believing something that size could actually fly. Its surface sparkled and shifted, and Jake realized he was looking at technology that was far beyond anything humans had ever built. The communications officer, Lieutenant Mary Johnson, looked up from her station with wide eyes. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission. It's single quotes S. It's mathematics. Numbers and equations." Dr. Hayes jumped up from his chair and rushed to the communications station. His fingers flew over the keyboard as he fed the alien message into his translation computer. Jake watched the numbers scroll across the screen, understanding none of it, but feeling excited anyway. "It's a greeting," Peter said after a few minutes. His voice was quiet with wonder. "They're introducing themselves using mathematics because math is the same everywhere in the universe. This is exactly what we hoped would happen." Ambassador Carter stepped forward. "What are they saying, Doctor?" Peter studied his screen more carefully. "They're identifying themselves as the Zephyrian Dominion. They're saying they are the guardians of something called the Outer Spiral. I think they mean they control a large part of this area of the galaxy." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. The aliens controlled part of the galaxy. That meant they were probably much more powerful than humans. He hoped they were friendly. The translation computer beeped, and more text appeared on the screen. Peter read it quickly, then looked confused. "This is strange. They're saying something about their position in relation to us." The computer is translating it as, "They're saying they are servants who await our commands." Ambassador Carter blinked in surprise. "Servants? They're offering to serve us?" "That's what the computer says," Peter replied, but he sounded uncertain. "Maybe their society works differently than ours. Maybe they're being polite by offering to help us." Jake looked back at the massive alien ships floating in space. Something about this didn't feel right. Beings with technology that advanced didn't usually offer to serve anyone. But the computer had never been wrong before. And Peter was the expert on languages. Ambassador Carter straightened her shoulders and walked to the communication station. If they're offering friendship and assistance, then we should respond generously. Open a channel. Lieutenant Johnson pressed several buttons. Channel open, Ambassador. Carter cleared her throat and began to speak in her most diplomatic voice. Greetings to the Zephyrian Dominion. We are representatives of humanity from the planet Earth. We are pleased to make contact with your people. As fellow intelligent beings, we offer you our friendship and protection. We invite you to join us in exploring the galaxy together. We promise to treat you fairly and to help you in any way we can. She paused, then added, we hope this will be the beginning of a long and peaceful relationship between our peoples. Jake smiled as he listened. It was a perfect diplomatic response, generous and friendly, but not weak. Earth's leaders would be proud when they heard the recording. The transmission ended, and they waited for a reply. Jake expected to wait several minutes, since the alien ships were quite far away and radio signals took time to travel through space. But the response came back in less than 10 seconds. The silence that followed was different from the quiet that had come before. The silence felt heavy and dangerous. Jake noticed that the alien ships had stopped moving completely. They hung in space like frozen jewels, but something about them had changed. Dr. Hayes was staring at his computer screen with a look of growing horror. Ambassador, he said slowly, I think we may have a problem. What kind of problem? Carter asked. I'm running the translation program backwards, checking our message to see how it would sound to them. The computer says that what we just told them sounds like a demand for immediate surrender. Jake felt his blood turn to ice. What do you mean, surrender? Peter's hands shook as he typed. Our offer of protection and friendship. The way the computer translated it into their language, it sounds like we're ordering them to give up their territory and become our slaves. And when we said we hope for a peaceful relationship, in their language it came out as a threat. We basically told them to surrender or face war. Ambassador Carter went very pale. That can't be right. Check it again. I've checked it 3 times. Peter said. His voice was barely a whisper. The translation program made an error. A big error. Instead of offering friendship, we just declared war on them. Jake looked back at the alien ships. They were still floating silently in space, but now he could see that panels were opening on their surfaces. Things that looked very much like weapons were emerging from inside the crystal structures. Lieutenant Johnson's voice cracked as she spoke. Sir, I'm detecting massive energy buildups from all 12 ships. Whatever those weapons are, they're powering up. Jake grabbed the communications microphone. Maybe they could still fix this. Maybe they could explain the mistake before it was too late. This is Commander Morrison of the UES Horizon. There has been a misunderstanding. We did not mean to threaten you. Our translation computer made an error. We want peace, not war. But even as he spoke, Jake could see it was too late. The alien weapons were glowing now, bright enough to hurt his eyes even through the ship's protective screens. The Zephyrian Dominion had heard what they thought was a declaration of war from a species they had never met before. The largest alien ship moved closer, and Jake could see that it was easily 10 times the size of the horizon. If humanity had just accidentally started a war with these beings, it was going to be a very short war. In the space of 10 minutes, first contact had gone from humanity's greatest dream to their worst nightmare. And it had all started with a computer that couldn't tell the difference between hello, friend, and surrender or die. Captain Ben Rodriguez was drinking his morning coffee when the emergency alarm started screaming throughout his ship. He nearly dropped his cup as he jumped up from his chair in the captain's quarters of the UES Defiant. The alarm meant only one thing: Earth was in serious trouble. He ran to the bridge, still wearing his pajamas under his hastily thrown-on jacket. His crew was already at their stations, looking confused and worried. Lieutenant Tony Garcia, his communications officer, was holding a headset to his ear with a look of disbelief on his face. "Captain, we're getting an emergency message from Earth Command," Tony said. It's hard to believe, sir." "What does it say?" Ben asked as he dropped into his captain's chair. Tony read from his screen. "All Earth vessels return to Sol. System immediately. Mission Priority Alpha 1. We are now at war with an alien species called the Zephyrian Dominion." This is not a drill. Ben stared at his communications officer. "War? We just made contact with them yesterday. How are we at war already?" "I don't know, sir. The message doesn't explain. It just says to come home right now and prepare for battle." Ben looked around at his crew. They were all young people, most of them on their first deep space mission. None of them had ever been in a real fight, let alone a war with aliens. Ben himself had been in the military for 20 years, but he had never fought anyone more dangerous than space pirates. "Set course for Earth," he ordered. "Maximum speed." Back on Earth, President Helen Torres sat in the emergency meeting room. Deep underground beneath the White House, the room was filled with military officers, scientists, and government officials, all talking at once. The noise was giving her a headache, but she couldn't blame them for being excited. This was the biggest crisis in human history. General Rick Patterson, the head of Earth's military forces, stood at the front of the room with a grim expression on his face. He was a big man with gray hair and scars on his hands from his years as a soldier. Right now, he looked like he wanted to punch something. "Ladies and gentlemen," the general said loudly, and the room fell silent. "We have a problem. A big problem. 3 hours ago, our first contact mission accidentally declared war on an alien empire that controls over 3,000 star systems." Someone in the back of the room gasped. President Torres felt sick to her stomach. 3,000 star systems meant the aliens were incredibly powerful. Earth controlled exactly one star system, and they were still working on colonizing Mars. "How did this happen?" asked Dr. Amy Sullivan, Earth's top expert on alien psychology. She was a short woman with curly hair who always asked the hardest questions. General Patterson activated a large screen on the wall. It showed the recording of Ambassador Carter's message to the aliens, along with the translation that the aliens had received. "Our computer translated our friendly greeting as a demand for surrender. The aliens think we ordered them to give up their empire or face destruction." The room erupted in angry voices. Everyone was shouting questions and accusations. "President." Torres banged her hand on the table until they quieted down. "What's done is done," she said firmly. "The question now is what we do next." "General, what are our options?" General Patterson looked uncomfortable. "Honestly, Madam President, our options are limited. We have 47 ships in our entire space fleet. The aliens have thousands, possibly tens of thousands. Their technology is centuries ahead of ours. If they decide to attack Earth, we can't stop them." "So we surrender?" asked someone from the back of the room. "We can try," the general replied. "But there's another problem. We've been monitoring alien communications, and it seems like declaring war on someone is a very serious matter in their culture. They may not accept surrender now that we've challenged them." Dr. Sullivan raised her hand. "I've been studying the recordings of their ships. Their behavior suggests that they were genuinely surprised by our declaration of war. But once they decided we were enemies, they immediately began acting like military professionals. I think they take warfare very seriously." President Torres rubbed her temples. "How long do we have before they attack?" "Unknown," General Patterson answered, "but probably not long. Their ships can travel much faster than ours. If they left their home system right after our message, they could be here within days." As if summoned by his words, an aide rushed into the room and whispered something in the general's ear. His face went white. "Madam President," he said slowly, "I've just received word that alien ships have been detected entering our solar system. They're already here." The room fell completely silent. President Torres felt like the world was spinning around her. "How many ships?" "Our deep space sensors are picking up at least 50 vessels. They're spread throughout the solar system, conducting what appears to be reconnaissance. They're scanning every human installation, every ship, every planet." Dr. Sullivan leaned forward. "They're gathering intelligence, learning about our defenses before they attack. That's actually good news. It means they're being careful. They don't want to underestimate us." "How is that good news?" President Torres asked. "Because it means they respect us as a potential threat. If they thought we were completely helpless, they would have just destroyed Earth immediately. The fact that they're taking time to study us means they think we might actually fight back." General Patterson nodded slowly. "She's right. And if they expect us to fight, then maybe we should fight. At least we'll go down with dignity." "Go down?" President Torres stood up. "General, I didn't become president to surrender to aliens. If they want a war, we'll give them a war." "Madam President, with all respect, we can't win. They're too advanced, too powerful." "Maybe we can't win," she replied, "but that doesn't mean we have to lose easily. Earth has never given up without a fight, and we're not going to start now." She turned to address the entire room. "I want every military base on full alert. I want every ship we have armed and ready. I want our scientists working around the clock to figure out how their technology works. And I want our factories working overtime to build more weapons." "What kind of weapons?" asked Dr. Janet Miller from the research division. "Any kind, all kinds. If we're going to fight aliens with technology we don't understand, we need to try everything we can think of. Nuclear missiles, laser cannons, particle beams, even rocks if that's what it takes." General Patterson looked skeptical. "Madam President, throwing rocks at starships isn't going to accomplish much." "Maybe not," she said, "but I'd rather die throwing rocks than die begging for mercy. At least our children will know we tried." Over the next few hours, reports came in from all over the solar system. The alien ships were everywhere, quietly, observing human activities. They didn't attack, but they didn't communicate either. They just watched and recorded everything. Captain Rodriguez arrived at Earth 3 days later to find the planet in chaos. Every military base was buzzing with activity. Factories that used to make cars were now making missiles. Scientists who used to study butterflies were now trying to understand alien technology. Even children were helping, collecting scrap metal. For the war effort, Ben reported to General Patterson at Earth Command. The general looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Captain Rodriguez," the general said, "I have a mission for you. It's dangerous, probably impossible, but it's important." "What do you need me to do, sir?" "I want you to take your ship and get close to one of their vessels. Close enough to scan it properly. We need to understand how their technology works. If we're going to have any chance at all." Ben nodded. "Yes, sir. When do I leave?" "Right now. And Captain, if you don't come back, make sure your sacrifice teaches us something useful." As Ben walked back to his ship, he wondered what his crew would think when he told them they were going to fly directly toward an alien warship that could destroy them with a single shot. But when he reached the Defiant, he found his crew already preparing for launch. They had heard about the mission and volunteered anyway. Maybe humans couldn't win this war, Ben thought as his ship lifted off from Earth, but they were certainly going to make it interesting. Colonel Dave Mitchell floated in his command chair aboard the U's Guardian, watching the red planet Mars grow larger through the main window. Behind him, 23 other human ships spread out in a loose formation. It wasn't much of a fleet compared to what the aliens had, but it was everything Earth could spare for this mission. Dave had been a pilot for 15 years, before becoming a colonel. He had flown in 3 different wars on Earth and had never lost a battle. But he had also never fought aliens with weapons that could destroy planets. Today, that was about to change. His communications officer, Lieutenant Sue Palmer, looked up from her station with worry in her eyes. "Colonel, we're getting readings from the alien fleet. 12 ships, just like the report said. They're holding position near the asteroid belt." Dave nodded. The alien ships had been there for 2 days, apparently waiting for the human fleet to arrive. It was almost like they wanted to have a fair fight. Dave hoped that was true, because humans were going to need every advantage they could get. "All ships, this is Colonel Mitchell," he said into his microphone. "Remember the plan. We don't fight like they expect us to fight. We use everything we learned from fighting pirates and smugglers. Hit fast, hit hard, and don't stay in one place long enough for them to target us." The alien commander, Admiral Kestmore, stood in the crystal control room of his flagship, watching the human ships approach. In his 300 years of military service, he had conquered 47 different worlds. Every single species had followed the same pattern when facing Zephyrian forces. They would form up in neat battle lines, fire their weapons until they ran out of ammunition, then surrender when they realized they couldn't win. Admiral Moore expected the humans to do the same thing. Their ships were small and primitive, their weapons were weak by Zephyrian standards, and they were outnumbered. This should be over in less than an hour. The first sign that something was different came when the human ships suddenly scattered in all directions instead of staying in formation. Admiral Moore watched in confusion as the human vessels disappeared behind asteroids, dove below the plane of the solar system, and spread out across thousands of kilometers of space. "Tactical officer," Admiral Moore said to his subordinate, "what are they doing?" "Unknown, sir. This does not match any standard battle formation in our records." Before Admiral Moore could respond, the first human attack began. 3 human ships came screaming out from behind a large asteroid, moving faster than the Admiral had thought possible. They fired everything they had at the nearest Zephyrian vessel, then immediately changed direction and disappeared behind another asteroid before the Zephyrians could return fire. The attack did very little damage to the Zephyrian ship, but Admiral Moore was surprised by the speed and coordination of the maneuver. "Pursue those ships," he ordered, but when his ships moved toward the asteroid where the humans had hidden, they found nothing. The humans had already moved somewhere else. And while the Zephyrian ships were looking for the first group of attackers, another group of human ships attacked from the opposite direction. Colonel Mitchell smiled grimly as he watched his plan work. The aliens were bigger and stronger, but they were also slower and less flexible. Human ships could change direction quickly, hide behind asteroids, and attack from unexpected angles. It was like fighting elephants with wolves. "Blue team, this is Mitchell," he said into his radio. "Nice work on that last run. Now get ready for Phase 2. Captain Lisa Barnes commanded one of the human ships, a converted cargo hauler called the U.E.'s Wolverine. Her ship wasn't designed for fighting, but it was tough and reliable. More importantly, it was expendable. Barnes had volunteered for the most dangerous job in the battle plan. She watched through her window as 2 Zephyrian ships moved to intercept her. They were beautiful in a deadly way, their crystal hulls reflecting the light of the sun like jewels. Barnes almost felt bad about what she was going to do to them. "All crew to escape pods," she ordered over the ship's intercom. "This is it." Her crew had already been preparing for this moment. Within 60 seconds, everyone except Barnes had evacuated the ship. She was alone on the bridge, flying directly toward the alien vessels. Admiral Moore watched the single human ship approach in his formation and felt confused. Was this some kind of surrender? The ship was broadcasting no messages and showing no signs of retreat. It was simply flying straight at his most powerful warship. "Sir," his tactical officer said. "The human vessel is not slowing down. Impact in 30 seconds. Impact?" Admiral Moore couldn't believe what he was hearing. "They're going to ram us?" "It appears so, sir." Admiral Moore had never heard of such a thing. Ramming was a tactic from ancient times, when ships were made of wood and metal. No civilized species would throw away a starship and crew just to damage an enemy vessel. But that was exactly what Captain Barnes was doing. At the last possible second, she overloaded her ship's reactor and aimed directly for the Zephyrian flagship. The explosion that followed could be seen from Mars. The Zephyrian ship survived the impact, but it was badly damaged. More importantly, Admiral Moore finally understood what kind of enemy he was facing. These humans didn't just fight to win. They fought as if death was preferable to defeat. "All ships," Admiral Moore ordered, "maximum alert. These humans are more dangerous than they appear." Back on Earth, the war effort was changing everything about human society. President Torres had expected people to panic when they learned about the alien invasion. Instead, they had become more united than ever before. Factories that had been competing with each other were now sharing information and resources. Scientists from different countries were working together on projects that would have been impossible before the war. Even children were helping, collecting materials and learning about space technology in school. Dr. Frank Miller was one of those scientists. Before the war, he had been working on better car engines in a small laboratory in Detroit. Now he was in charge of a team of 200 researchers trying to understand alien technology. The breakthrough came when Captain Rodriguez returned from his dangerous scouting mission with fragments of a Zephyrian ship that had been damaged in the first battle. Frank and his team worked for days without sleep, studying the alien materials and trying to figure out how they worked. "I don't believe it," Frank said as he stared at his computer screen. "Their power systems are actually less efficient than ours in some ways." His assistant, Dr. Karen Wong, looked up from her microscope. "What do you mean?" "Look at this," Frank said, pointing to his screen. "Their energy systems are designed to be perfectly safe and stable. They never push their technology beyond design limits. But our fusion reactors can be overloaded to produce much more power for short periods." "That's because we're reckless," Karen replied. "We built our reactors to be pushed to the breaking point because we couldn't afford to build them any bigger." Frank smiled. "Exactly. And that might be our advantage. They have better technology, but they're afraid to break it. We're not afraid to break anything if it means winning." Over the next week, Frank's team developed new weapons based on this discovery. They took human fusion reactors and modified them to explode with much more force than the aliens expected. They turned mining lasers into weapons by removing all the safety systems. They even figured out how to turn communication satellites into guided missiles. The second battle took place near Jupiter, and this time the humans were ready. Colonel Mitchell had learned from the first fight and developed new tactics. Instead of trying to fight the aliens ship to ship, the humans would swarm them like angry bees. When the alien fleet arrived expecting another conventional battle, they found 30 human ships attacking from every direction at once. The humans used their new weapons without any concern for safety, overloading their reactors and burning out their systems to get every bit of power possible. Admiral Moore watched in amazement as human ships sacrificed themselves to take out single Zephyrian vessels. He had never seen anything like it. The humans fought as if every ship was a weapon to be thrown away. Every crew member a warrior willing to die for victory. By the end of the battle, the humans had lost 15 ships, but they had destroyed or damaged 8 Zephyrian vessels. For the first time in Admiral Moore's career, his forces had retreated from a battlefield. As the Zephyrian fleet regrouped near Saturn, Admiral Moore sent a message back to his home world. The message was simple but shocking. The humans are not like other species. They do not fight to survive. They fight to win, no matter the cost. Ambassador Tresca of the Altarian Federation floated in her water-filled chamber, watching the latest reports from the human-Zephyrian war with growing amazement. Her species had evolved in the oceans of a distant world, and they were known throughout the galaxy for their patience and wisdom. But even she had never seen anything like what was happening in the Sol system. The war had been going on for 6 months now, and the humans were still fighting. This was impossible according to everything the galaxy knew about warfare. When species fought the Zephyrian Dominion, they lasted days at most. The longest anyone had ever resisted was 3 weeks, and that was the mighty Corvan Empire with their 1,000-ship fleet. Tresca activated her communication system and sent a message to the Galactic Council. "This is Ambassador Tresca reporting on the human-Zephyrian conflict. The situation continues to develop in ways that challenge our understanding of military science. On the other side of the galaxy, war leader Gak of the Talon Empire received the same reports and felt something he had not experienced in decades: excitement. The Talon were a warrior species who believed that strength was the only thing that mattered in the universe. They had always respected the Zephyrians for their military power, but they had never seen courage like what the humans were showing. Gak called his military advisors together in the great hall of his fortress ship. "Tell me about these humans," he demanded. "How can such a weak species fight so well?" His chief advisor, a scarred veteran named Crack, displayed holographic images of the latest battle. "They do not fight like any species we have encountered, war leader. They use their own ships as weapons. They sacrifice everything for small victories. They seem to prefer death to defeat." "Show me," Gak ordered. The hologram displayed the Battle of Europa, where Commander Kelly Wright had led 12 human ships against a Zephyrian battle group. The humans had been outgunned and outnumbered, with no hope of victory through conventional tactics. So they had done something unconventional. Wright's ships had spread out in a wide circle around the Zephyrian fleet, then accelerated toward the center at maximum speed. When the alien ships moved to intercept them, the humans had done something that Zephyrian computers initially dismissed as sensor errors. They had turned their fusion reactors into bombs. All 12 human ships had detonated simultaneously, right in the middle of the Zephyrian formation. The explosion had destroyed 17 alien vessels and damaged many more. It was the largest single victory humans had achieved in the war. Gak watched the recording 3 times, each viewing making him more impressed. "These humans understand something that most species have forgotten," he said finally. "Sometimes the willingness to die is more powerful than the ability to live." Meanwhile, Admiral Moore was discovering the same thing from the other side of the battle. His fleet had been reduced by almost half, and his tactical computers were constantly being updated as humans developed new ways to fight. Every battle brought new surprises, new tactics that violated everything Zephyrians understood about warfare. The latest human innovation was the most troubling yet. They had started using their civilian ships as weapons. Cargo haulers, passenger liners, even mining vessels were being converted into attack craft. The humans were turning their entire civilization into a military force. Admiral Moore called a meeting with his senior officers in the command center of his flagship. The crystal walls of the room showed tactical displays of the Sol system, marked with the positions of hundreds of human ships. "Report," Admiral Moore ordered. Commander Velth, his intelligence officer, activated a holographic display. "The humans have now deployed over 400 vessels in defensive positions throughout their system. Most of these are civilian ships that have been armed with mining lasers, cargo launchers, and improvised weapons." "Improvised weapons?" Admiral Moore asked. "Yes, sir. They are using everything from nuclear waste to compressed gas as ammunition. Yesterday, a human cargo ship fired a load of titanium bars at one of our scouts. The bars were accelerated to nearly the speed of light using their cargo launcher systems." Admiral Moore felt something he had not experienced in centuries: doubt. What are our losses? 43 ships destroyed, 67 damaged. The humans have lost over 200 ships, but they continue to build more. Their industrial capacity has increased by 600% since the war began. Another officer, Commander Zeshka, added her report. Sir, we are also detecting unusual activity on the human home world. They appear to be dismantling their major cities and converting the materials into weapons and ships. Admiral Moore was quiet for a long moment. They are turning their entire planet into a fortress. Yes, sir. And sir, there is something else. We have been monitoring human communications, and their morale is actually increasing. The longer the war continues, the more determined they become. This was the most troubling news of all. In Admiral Moore's experience, prolonged warfare broke the spirit of defending species. They would fight bravely at first, but as losses mounted and hope faded, they would eventually surrender. The humans were doing the opposite. They were getting stronger. The news of the human resistance had spread throughout the galaxy, and other species were beginning to take notice. The Peaceful Harmony Collective, a group of species devoted to avoiding all conflict, sent a diplomatic mission to both sides offering to mediate. Representative Sewell of the Harmony Collective arrived at the edge of the Sol system in a ship marked with symbols of peace. She was a tall, thin being with silver skin and large eyes that seemed to see everything. Her species had ended dozens of wars through careful negotiation. She sent messages to both the human and Zephyrian fleets, offering to arrange peace talks. The Zephyrian response came quickly. Admiral Moore was willing to discuss terms, though he made it clear that the humans would have to accept Zephyrian authority. The human response was more complicated. President Torres agreed to meet with the mediator, but she also made it clear that Earth would not surrender its independence. The meeting was arranged to take place on a neutral space station in the outer system. Representative Sewell had mediated many conflicts, but she had never met beings quite like humans. President Torres arrived at the peace talks with a small delegation, including General Patterson and Dr. Sullivan. They were polite but firm, and they showed no signs of being intimidated by the situation. We appreciate your offer to help, President Torres said, but we need to be clear about our position. We will not accept foreign rule, and we will not surrender our freedom. If the Zephyrians want peace, it must be peace between equals. Representative Sewell was surprised by this response. Madam President, you must understand that your species is significantly outmatched. The Zephyrian Dominion controls thousands of star systems. Surely some form of accommodation is preferable to continued warfare. Not to us, President Torres replied. We would rather die free than live as slaves. Dr. Sullivan added, Representative Sewell, we understand that most species eventually surrender when faced with overwhelming force. But humans have a saying, give me liberty or give me death. We mean it literally. The peace talks continued for 3 days, but it became clear that the two sides were too far apart to reach an agreement. The Zephyrians expected the humans to accept their authority, and the humans refused to give up their independence. Representative Sewell finally had to admit defeat. I have never encountered a situation like this, she reported to the Galactic Council. The humans are completely unwilling to accept any form of surrender, even when faced with certain destruction. They seem to believe that freedom is worth any price. Back in the Sol system, the war continued. But now other species were watching, and some were beginning to choose sides. The Talon Empire announced that they were impressed by human courage and offered to sell weapons to Earth. The Corvan Empire, still bitter about their own defeat by the Zephyrians, began secretly providing intelligence to the humans. Even more importantly, younger members of various species throughout the galaxy began to question why the Zephyrian Dominion should be allowed to conquer anyone they chose. The human resistance was inspiring others to think about freedom and independence in ways they never had before. Admiral Moore received reports of these developments with growing concern. The war that had started as a simple conquest was becoming something much larger. The humans were not just fighting for their own survival. They were challenging the entire structure of galactic politics. For the first time in Zephyrian history, their military might was not bringing them victory. Instead, it was bringing them something they had never experienced before: isolation. The galaxy was watching, and many species were beginning to wonder if the humans might be right about something important. Admiral Moore sent a message to his superiors on the Zephyrian home world. The strategic situation has changed. This is no longer a simple conquest. The humans have turned this conflict into a symbol of resistance that is inspiring other species throughout the galaxy. We must consider new approaches. The response from the Zephyrian High Command was immediate and clear: continue the war until the humans surrender completely. But Admiral Moore was beginning to wonder if the humans would ever surrender, no matter how long the war lasted. Admiral Moore stood in the command center of his flagship, looking at reports that would have been impossible to believe a year ago. His mighty fleet, which had started with over 200 ships, was now down to fewer than 100 operational vessels. The humans, meanwhile, had somehow increased their forces and were fighting better than ever. The latest battle had been the most shocking yet. A group of human ships led by Captain Rodriguez had actually attacked a Zephyrian supply convoy in deep space, destroying 3 cargo vessels and capturing their contents. No species had ever dared to attack Zephyrian supply lines before. The humans were not just defending their home system anymore. They were taking the fight to the enemy. Admiral Moore's communications officer approached with a message tablet. "Sir, we have received new orders from the High Command." Admiral Moore read the message and felt his heart sink. The High Command was ordering him to prepare for a final assault on Earth itself. They wanted him to destroy the human home world completely, to make an example that would prevent other species from following the human example. But Admiral Moore had been fighting these humans for a year now, and he had learned something important about them. Destroying their planet would not break their spirit. It would only prove to the galaxy that the humans had been right to resist. And it would turn every surviving human into an enemy dedicated to revenge. "Sir," his tactical officer said quietly, "there is something else. Our intelligence reports indicate that several other species are now openly supporting the humans. The Talon Empire has provided them with advanced weapons. The Corvan Empire is sharing strategic information. Even some members of the Harmony Collective are sending supplies." Admiral Moore realized that the war had already been lost, not because the humans had defeated his fleet, but because they had defeated the idea that the Zephyrian Dominion was invincible. The humans had shown the galaxy that anyone could resist if they were willing to pay the price. "Open a communication channel to the human fleet," Admiral Moore ordered. His officers looked shocked. "Sir, the High Command has not authorized negotiations." "I am not asking for authorization," Admiral Moore replied firmly. "I am ending this war before it destroys both our species." President Torres was in the underground command center beneath Washington when the message arrived. General Patterson brought her the communication tablet with a look of disbelief on his face. "Madam President, we're receiving a message from the Zephyrian Admiral. He's requesting a formal meeting to discuss terms." President Torres read the message carefully. "He wants to meet in neutral space, with representatives from other galactic species as witnesses." "What do you think this means?" Dr. Sullivan, who had been studying Zephyrian culture for the past year, looked thoughtful. "In their society, requesting a formal parley is a sign of respect between equals. He's not offering us surrender terms. He's treating us as worthy opponents." "Could it be a trap?" General Patterson asked. "Possibly," President Torres replied, "but we've been fighting for a year against impossible odds. If they wanted to destroy US, they've had plenty of chances. I think we should hear what he has to say." The meeting was arranged to take place at a neutral space station operated by the Galactic Council. Representatives from a dozen different species came to witness what many believed would be the end of the most unusual war in galactic history. President Torres arrived aboard the newly constructed U.S. Victory, the most advanced ship humanity had ever built. It was smaller than the Zephyrian flagship, but it incorporated everything humans had learned about alien technology during the war. Captain Rodriguez, now promoted to Admiral, commanded the vessel. Admiral Moore came aboard the space station with a small honor guard, following diplomatic protocols that had not been used in centuries. When he saw President Torres waiting in the meeting chamber, he was surprised by how young and small she appeared. This tiny being had led her species in a war that had changed the galaxy. "President Torres," Admiral Moore said, speaking through a translation device, "I greet you as one warrior greets another." "Admiral Moore," she replied, "I greet you with respect for a worthy opponent." They sat across from each other at a table made of crystal from the Altarian home world. Representatives from other species sat around the edges of the room, watching history being made. Admiral Moore spoke first. "I have come to propose an end to this conflict, but not the end that either of our governments expected when this war began." "What kind of end?" President Torres asked. "An end between equals. A peace treaty between the Zephyrian Dominion and the Human Republic, recognizing each other as sovereign and independent." Dr. Sullivan, who was part of the human delegation, leaned forward. "Admiral, why would the Zephyrian Dominion agree to treat humanity as equals? You still have superior technology and more ships." Admiral Moore was quiet for a moment, then answered honestly, "Because you have taught us something we had forgotten. We had become so powerful that we thought force was the only thing that mattered. But you have shown us that courage and determination can be more powerful than any weapon." He activated a holographic display showing battles from the war. "In 1 year of fighting, your species has accomplished things that we believed were impossible. You have fought when victory was hopeless. You have sacrificed everything for freedom. You have inspired other species throughout the galaxy to question our authority." President Torres watched the images of human ships fighting against overwhelming odds. "You could still destroy Earth if you wanted to." "Yes," Admiral Moore admitted, "but it would be meaningless. Destroying your world would not give us victory. It would only prove that we are the monsters you believed us to be. And it would turn every human survivor into an enemy dedicated to our destruction." Representative Tresca of the Altarian Federation, who was serving as mediator, spoke up. "Admiral Moore, what are you proposing exactly?" "A partnership," Admiral Moore replied. "The Zephyrian Dominion has controlled the galaxy through force for thousands of years. But force alone is not enough anymore. We need allies who can teach us new ways of thinking." He turned to President Torres. "Your species has shown tactical innovation that we have never seen. Your people have developed technologies by pushing systems beyond their designed limits in ways that we would never attempt. Most importantly, you have shown that some things are worth fighting for even when victory seems impossible." President Torres considered his words carefully. "What would this partnership involve?" "The Zephyrian Dominion would recognize human independence and territorial rights. In return, we would like to establish an exchange program. Zephyrian military advisors would learn from human tactical innovation, while human scientists would gain access to our advanced technology." Dr. Sullivan looked skeptical. "And what about other species that might want their independence?" Admiral Moore nodded. "That is a conversation the galaxy needs to have. This war has shown that ruling through fear alone is not sustainable. The Zephyrian Dominion must evolve or face constant rebellion." The negotiations continued for 3 days. Other species representatives offered input and suggestions. The Talon Empire praised human courage and offered to guarantee the treaty. The Harmony Collective provided legal frameworks for peaceful coexistence. When the treaty was finally signed, it contained provisions that no one had expected when the war began. Humanity would maintain complete independence, but would serve as military consultants to the Zephyrian Dominion. Zephyrian technology would be shared with humans to help them develop their own spacefaring civilization. Most importantly, the treaty established principles for other species who wanted to negotiate their own independence. 6 months after the treaty was signed, Admiral Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the UE's Liberty, the first human ship equipped with Zephyrian faster-than-light engines. His mission was to investigate reports of aggressive expansion by a species called the Corvan Empire in a distant part of the galaxy. Beside him stood Zephyrian Commander Velth, who was serving as an advisor and learning human tactical methods. The two had developed a friendship based on mutual respect earned through combat. "Admiral," Commander Velth said, "I have been studying human military history. You have a saying that I find interesting. Fortune favors the bold." Rodriguez smiled. "That's right. It means that taking risks sometimes leads to better results than playing it safe. The Zephyrian equivalent would be success follows careful planning," Velter replied. "I think we have much to learn from each other." As their ship jumped to hyperspace, Rodriguez reflected on how much had changed. Humanity had gone from being an unknown species to being respected partners in galactic affairs. The war that had started with a translation error had ended with both species stronger than they had been before. Back on Earth, President Torres was giving a speech to the newly formed Galactic Assembly, an organization that had been created to prevent future wars through communication and cooperation. Representatives from dozens of species listened as she spoke about the lessons learned from the human-Zephyrian conflict. "A year ago, we accidentally declared war on the most powerful military force in the galaxy," she said. "Today, we stand here as partners and friends,